This is 1.1 of GCSE Maths. Just an introduction to how this series will work before we start. There's 18 chapters that I've made, and I've split them into 5 sections, and we'll simply go through these chapters, covering all the GCSE Maths content for all the major exam boards for both foundation and higher tier. We'll go from numbers to algebra, graphs, ratios, shapes, statistics, cover absolutely everything, and the aim of the channel is not just to tell you how to do each question, but to give you an understanding of why these things work, so that when you're going to attempt these trickier questions at the end of each paper, you're confident in those unfamiliar contexts that you can still get a good number of marks and really boost your grade as much as possible. So we'll start with chapter 1, which is types of numbers. So really what this looks at is fractions, decimals, percentages, converting between them, and then what you can actually do with these things. So first of all, probably what you're most familiar with are whole numbers. Numbers such as 3, such as 7, such as 400. These are, you can imagine having a certain number of these things. You can have 3 apples, you can have 7 apples, you can have 400 apples. These are numbers which we use in everyday language and are therefore quite familiar and good to deal with. But unfortunately, life would be too easy if they were the only things we had to deal with. So of course we have negative whole numbers. We have things like -2, -6, -1,000. And these are used in contexts such as financially, to do with money. If you owe someone money, you might say, if I owe someone £6, you might say that I have -6. But then we've got to think about, okay, if I have a number line here, and I have, there's my 0 and there's my 1, well, there's clearly this gap in the middle. What lies in this gap? And so that's where fractions come in. We can say that this number in between 0 and 1 is a half. I'm sure you're more than aware of that. But what exactly is a fraction, right? If I have some number a over some number b written as a fraction, and if that's confusing, if you just imagine I have a half here, I've just replaced my a with the number 1, and replaced my b with the number 2. What exactly is a fraction telling me? And actually, you've seen this sort of thing in an operation, that is division. You'll notice the division sign looks like a fraction. I've slightly elongated it for reference, but this division sign is just a numerator here, where that dot is, a denominator here where that dot is, that's your a and your b here, and a line, so it looks like a fraction, and indeed it is. All that this a over b means is a divided by b. So similarly, a half is the same as 1 divided by 2, and that is the definition of a fraction. There is no other way, really, of defining a fraction. If I have something like 2/3, 2 over 3, that is equal to 2 divided by 3. And so that's really, from here on in, from this video, all the way through the course, how I'd want you to think of fractions. They are the numerator of the fraction divided by the denominator of a fraction. 2 divided by 3. And if you think about it like that, they become less daunting and they become more applicable to the whole numbers that you're more used to already. And that's the important fractions, of course. They can be added, subtracted, etc. We'll look at them in later videos, but for now, there's one thing to take from this video. It's simply how you can relate fractions to whole numbers. Then there's decimals. So if I draw that number line again between 0 and 1, the sort of classic way of defining it would be, okay, what's in the middle is 0.5. It is no wholes, but some amount of, well, you'll know from those values that's tenths, so some amount of tenths, and then I can add more numbers at the end of said decimal, some amount of hundredths, some amount of thousandths, and so on and so forth. So decimals in that sense are fairly easy. They're probably easier than fractions in telling where on the number line they lie, because of course you can fairly easily tell that 0.6 is greater than 0.5. You can maybe less easily tell that 3/5 is greater than a half, even though, as we'll see, this is an equivalent statement. And then we've got percentages, which again, in a way, look like the division sign we saw earlier, but flipped on its side. And so you'll be thinking to yourself, does it relate to division? Well, yes, it does relate to division. There's the one thing you should know about maths is that when there are patterns, there's usually a reason for said patterns. Percentages literally means out of 100. right? So if I have 30%, that is 30 out of 100. Or in other words, 30 over 100. Right, and we'll look in more detail about converting fractions to percentages and vice versa later on, but just as being aware that percentages means out of 100 will stand you in good stead. And really that's all that's in 1.1. Looking at those fractions and percentages, just having an understanding what they mean, and we'll deal with them in greater detail in later videos. So I hope that helps. See you in 1.2.